friends, I'm Abby and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about my 10 best books of 2020. So I haven't really structured this, I've just got a top 3 at the end. So that's as far as the structuring's gone, and it's just going to be a big gush fest. Hope that's okay. So to start us off, I thought I'd talk about The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern, and I read this at the beginning of the year and it has stuck with me throughout the whole year. I really enjoyed the whole of that book. And it is just so whimsically written and just, I don't know, like the perfect, I loved it. So you're following a main character, Zachary, and at the beginning of the book he discovers a book in his university library and it's filled with short stories, and then he gets to a story which is actually the story from a moment in his childhood, and he's like, well, what am I doing in this book, in this library? Like what am I doing in here? And this book is many years old, and suddenly he's like, well, how is my life in there? How did it know that was going to happen? And so he's trying to figure out what's going on, and it goes from there. And the whole book, you've got like stories within stories. So you have not the book that he's found, you've got the different stories from in there interwoven into the story of Zachary. And then it all just starts coming together, and you get to a point where he's in this magical library, which I absolutely love this trope. I just loved how it all came together, and you don't, for a lot of the book you're confused because you're like, how is this all going to fit together? And then it does. You're like, oh wow. And it's all just weaving together this very whimsical, lyrical plot. I'd say it's quite character driven, and it's very setting driven as well. But those are the main aspects that really drive the plot forward, and I really liked the stories that are interwoven in between as well. Like, I found those were just really stunning, and if you're confused, keep going, you'll get it. I love this book, and I can completely understand why it's not going to work for everyone, but it really worked for me. And then continuing on a similar theme with magical libraries, I've got a whole section of magical libraries in my top 10, is The Library of the Unwritten by AJ Hackworth, and yet again a magical library, but this one is a library in hell. And so you're following the librarian Claire, and the job of her job is to prevent characters from these books from coming to life. And all of these books are unwritten books, books that have not been finished, that they've been unable to be finished. So these characters want to get out, and they want to persuade their author to finish the story, and characters can't meet authors because they cannot influence real world events, and so her job is to keep these characters in the books. And it's just so cool. And then there's like an interweaving plot where you've got the devil has supposedly written the book, so you have agents from both heaven and hell claiming ownership of this book. And I loved the way this was all combined, and then it was the characters in this that really spoke to me. So you've got a character that's escaped called Hero that you're following, and you've got Claire, and you've got other characters as well that they all have such distinct personalities. And oh yeah, I am really looking forward to the second book, which is coming out in February. The other third library book that I read, and I read this one pretty recently, and I'm actually really surprised about how much I really enjoyed it, and that is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. And for this I put trigger warnings for suicide, because you're following a main character who is very upset with her life, and she feels she has so many regrets with what she has chosen to do or not to do. And so she is at this point where she's not happy with her lot in life, and so she commits suicide. And at the moment between life and death, you end up in this place called the Magical Library, and the library is made up, the books are your life, and as though you made different choices, so it's your infinite versions of the life that you could have lived if you made X choice or X choice. And so she goes through and she examines her regrets, and looks at, if I did this would be my life, and if she's happy in that life. And so I loved the themes expressed in this book, and the way it examines like happiness and depression, and how we should be satisfied with our life. And although we have regrets, as is I guess human, we should be able to move past these regrets and be able to accept them, because the choices we have made are the best choices for who we are as people. And you may go, oh well, maybe I should have done that, but then would you be who you are today if you had done those things? And so I just loved the way this explored these themes, and it really spoke to me, and I really enjoyed this like twist with the magical library. And it's a really like poignant book, and I think it really speaks to people, and the messages that it portrays are so strong. So that is my whole like magical library section of my favourites. So I then also have Crescent City by Sarah J Maas, and I love everything Sarah J Maas. Maybe I'm a little bit biased towards her, but I literally love every book that woman has ever written, and I just will obsess over it. So Crescent City, I just devoured it, and I really enjoyed it. And you're following a main character, Bryce, and after the first, you're following her, and after the first 60 pages there is a catalyst and the whole plot sort of shifts. Then you're following her 2 years from that point, and she is employed by like the mayor or like the police department to work on a case, and she is paired up with a guy called Hunt, and so they are after doing this, and it is set in a fantasy world where it's very much an urban fantasy. It's set in a city, and you've got every different magical creature under the sun in this world, that it's all just, they're all there, and you're just following how it all progresses. And I loved the combination with the fantasy world and learning all about it, combined with the characters and the way they interacted and how they dealt with their, I guess, their grief and their history and their past. I guess the beginning book is, I didn't find it slow, but some people have said it's slower, and how it progresses up to the end where it's just plot twist after plot twist, and you're like, oh my god, how is this going to happen? How is this going to work? And how it all just progresses from there, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I then read I Am Pilgrim by Terry Hayes, and this is my boyfriend's favourite book. He reads this book pretty much every year, and he just loves it. He goes back to it and he will binge it. It's like an 800-page book, and he will read it in like 2 days. He compulsively reads that book, and it's following, I guess it's got a James Bond character in it, and he is, I guess, like an ex MI5, ex whatever, and so he is trying to solve a case. He gets brought into cases where they are unsolvable, and in this book there's like many different cases, and you see as the book goes on that they all link, and you see like how situations happening all over the world. This isn't just like set in one town, it's very much a global spread, and it really looks at like modern day political situations and just modern day societal things that we have, and then twists it into this political action thriller. And yeah, I would really describe it as like James Bond but in book format, and a little bit better because the twists are so good, and the way it just combines different elements and different twists is seriously good, and the way he solves these things as well, you're like, wow, I did not see how all this fitted together. So I would really recommend that if you are after that sort of book. I also have Shorefall by Robert Jackson Bennett, and I reread Foundryside, then I went straight into Shorefall, and oh, so good. Such a good series, and I'm so looking forward to the third book. And you're following, it's like a band of characters, so you have a main character, Zancy, but there is like all the other ones that are around her, and Shorefall is set, I think, a year or maybe 2 years after Foundryside, and you're following how the character dynamics have all progressed. And in this world there is this thing called scriving, which means that objects can be scribed to be something else. So a wheel which is on the flat will think that it's moving, and it's just such a cool system. It's like real world coding in a magical world, and the way that is, and the way I just really liked the playing with good and evil, and who is good and who is evil, and how we view someone. And I really liked the way the plot progressed, and the ending had me shook. I cannot wait for that third book. And yeah, I think it's the characters in this world that really, I just really enjoy all of the characters, and the way that they all fit together, and the way they all have very different personalities, but they're also complex. And From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. So I binge read From Blood and Ash and A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire earlier this year, and oh my god, those books just made me so happy. They were so fun, and that's just what you need some of the time. Like, I can understand that they're not necessarily like the best literature, but they were so fun, and that is just what I needed. I completely devoured them. I was just so enraptured by that world, and so just, I still think about it, and I think about like different theories for the next book, and like what I think is going to happen next, and what's planned for this world, and where it's going to be headed. And it's it's very much a mixture between fantasy and romance, and you're following a main character, Poppy, and her guard Hawk. And in this world there are things called Craven, which are basically like raving vampire zombies that go around like killing people. You have this Dark One who is seen as this presence of evil that is creating these Craven, and Poppy is raised in this society where she is the maiden and very much protected, and seen as, she can't be seen by anyone. She wears a veil, she can't really communicate with anyone, and she's leading up to her ascension, which is this thing which she doesn't really know much about, but that's where her path is leading, and she's going to have this monumental impact upon society. And then she meets Hawke, who is her guard, and it just goes from there. And it's just like plot twist after plot twist, and the romance is just like Jennifer L. Armentrout writes the best character dynamics, and banter is just so compelling. So we are now at my top 3. I believe I have talked about all of the other ones. Well, one of them is the Faithful and the Fallen series by John Gwynne, and oh my god, I loved that whole series. So we read the first book, Malice, for the Shelf Space book club, and I loved it so much. I'd owned it for so long, I really needed that push to read that first book, and then as soon as I did that, I pretty much read the whole of the series within a couple of months because I was so keen to figure out what was going to happen next. And I loved the world and the characters, and you're set in this world called the Banished Lands, where you have 2 gods, one of good, Elrond, and one of evil, Azeroth, and they have like their pawns upon the earth, which are going to be the bright star and the black sun. Then there's like a prophecy of who's going to be who and what their journey is going to entail, and in this world there are both humans and there are giants. It's just this very epic fantasy story. It's multiple POV, it's set like all over this world, so you've got different characters in different places and you're following them as it all comes together. And the first half of the Malice, I'd say, is very it's very like an introduction to the world and characters, and it is a little bit overwhelming, but then it gets so good. Like it just you get so into it, because the plot really starts to unravel and you start to see how it's all gonna piece together. But there are so many twists, and John Gwynne is not scared to kill off his characters. He's very keen to do it, it seems, and it's so compelling to read. Like they're quite long books, and the writing is quite small, but I just could not put those books down. And I remember going out for a walk and I was like, I need to get back from this walk right now because I need to finish this book. And I think that was Valor. And the whole series, I was so sad when I finished Wrath. Not because it was a sad ending, it was I guess a bittersweet ending, but I was so sad to say goodbye to the characters because I loved them so much and I just wanted to spend more time with them. I just wanted to be friends with them. John Gwynne's characters are so relatable. He writes them so well. Like, you love them and you hate them in equal measure. I then have The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and this book, oh my god, it spoke to me so much. Like, I was just in love with it. It completely took over my world. I just could not stop reading this book. And you're following a main character, Addie, and you're following her over 300 years of her life. So she starts in the 1700s and she makes this deal with the devil, and the consequence of this deal is that she ends up living forever, ever. All she really wanted was to get out of this marriage and to be able to make her own life choices and be able to have her own identity. And at the end of this, the consequence of this deal is that she's living forever, but nobody can remember her, and she cannot make any impact upon this world. She's invisible. So, well, she's not invisible, but like, as soon as she leaves the room, as soon as people are separated, then they forget her. And it's, how do you live with that? How do you live with that you cannot make an impact? That does your life even matter because nobody remembers you? And her coming to terms with that, and then you're spanning her life through from the beginning and like all the different aspects of history that she has lived through. And then there's also a timeline in the present day where she looks back on the past and she's experiencing her present. Oh my god, I just loved it so much. I loved Addie as a character. I loved the writing style. Like, this is V. Sharp's, I'd say it's her best work. I loved the writing in this. I loved the way that the story is written. It is so lyrical and beautifully written, and people say it was slow, but I completely devoured it. It was not slow for me at all. I cried so much at that ending. I did not stop crying. I was so... Those last like 50 pages, I was like, oh my god. The tears were flowing. It so emotionally impacted me. I was just completely overrun with emotions for that book. And if a book can impact me that much, then it must be good. And then the final book in my top 10 is The Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty. And I have loved the whole Daevabad trilogy. I have loved it from the beginning, and so I reread the second book before diving into this third book, and it was just so good. And you're following a main character. You've got 3 main characters. You've got Nari, Dara and Ali, and at the beginning of the book, Nari is living in Cairo and she accidentally summons a warrior djinn called Dara, who then tells her that she is actually from a long lost line of djinn, and she's not fully human. And so he takes her to the city of Daevabad. So much politics in this world, and the warring jinn and the way that they interact, and I just love the characters, and I loved how the third book just progressed. I love the way, like, from the first book to the second and third book, the way the whole dynamics of the characters progressed and the world building, it was just so epic and so good, the way it just, all of it progressed. I loved the themes in this book and the influences that it included, and the characters and their interactions were just, the whole book spoke to me. Like, I was reading this book and I was like, this book is just making me so happy. No, we're not like happy because I'm enjoying what's happening to these characters, because some of the moments were like, ugh, but like, it was just giving me the feels all the way through. I was just so happy to be reading it. And you know, when I was like, I love reading, and this is this book that's making me feel this way. Like, I am loving this. I cannot put this book down, and I wanted the book to go on forever. Like, I did not want this book to end. I was so happy to be reading it, and I was really wanted to race through it, but I also just never wanted to end. Those are my top books of 2020. Please let me know what your favourite books are, if any of these surprised you based on these. If you have any recommendations for me, please like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you in my future videos. Bye!